A very, very good morning to all of you and welcome to part 2 of your income from house property lecture. So I am Sri Ritma Bhatia and we'll be discussing how do you compute your income from house property. In the previous class, we understood that what actually is house property, how does my section 22 actually tells that how the income from house property has to be. Tax, what is the charging section? It says that you should be the owner and they should be the house property. Ownership, where we saw that the owner only would charge the income as house property. If you are subletting as a tenant, then it would go under the income from other sources or PGBP as the case may be. Then we saw the computation for let out property. We saw the computation for self-occupied property. We saw the interest deductions pay, what are the conditions to claim it, let out pay, how much interest you get. There's no limit on that. You can claim whatever interest is accrued during the year plus 1/5 of your pre-construction period installment starting from the year when the construction is completed and to the next 4 years. Self-occupied property may you only get the deduction of interest, no other municipal taxes, no standard deduction because gross annual value is nil. Interest deduction is first you have to calculate in the same manner like accrued during the year plus pre-construction period installment, and you have to restrict it to 2 lakhs in case the loan is taken for construction. In case the loan is taken for acquisition, the same method will go. If the loan is taken for repair, the limit is 30,000. Make sure that the construction loans are taken after 1st April 2000, after 1st April 1999, and at the same time the construction is completed in the period which is 5 years from the end of the financial year in which the loan was taken. ठीक है, उसके साथ we understood composite rent. उसके साथ we understood what about income from house property outside India. Everything would be taxed in India. Today we will be starting with understanding the provisions of deeming let out property. But before that, if you have any queries, I would be very happy to take it. So Muhammad Nasri, you can ask your query from the tax sections of the previous lectures during or once we have completed this topic towards the end of the class. Would that be fine? Interest on loans taken from friend or relatives are not deductible. No, they are deductible. They should be genuine loans. And as a proof, you should have a certificate from them and ensure that they are showing the same interest as their income in their income from other sources. Okay, Darshan? In case students, I miss any of your query, please retype the query again or wait for the lecture to end because definitely at the end of the lecture, we dedicate time for the query sessions, okay? Illustration 5, 1 second. Illustration 5, today we will cover the scenario. Then only you will be able to solve illustration 5, let out property vacant for the part of the year. चलिए स्टार्ट करें आज का क्लास. अभी जो टॉपिक्स गाइस नहीं हुए like 23.5, 23.4, please wait for the topics to get over and उसके बाद please ask the questions, okay? Jitendra, I just did a quick recap in the previous section of the previous session. Chalo, let's start today's class. Income deemed to be let out property. Now, when I was telling you that you can claim self-occupied property ka gross annual value nil and you can claim interest deduction up to 2 lakh or 30,000 as the case may be, but maximum for up to 2 houses. So maximum up to 2 houses. So what if you have to happen 3 houses which are self-occupied or not occupied due to your employment or due to you being into business, then what will happen? So for that, friends, you have to take the one, or after the two properties, you have to take every property as your deemed letter property. Now, how would that happen? What is the calculation method of that? Let's see. First, deemed let out property का मतलब क्या है? It would be assumed to be let out property. It would be assumed to be let out property. So, ma'am, if I have three houses, which say one house in Mumbai, one in Chennai, and one in Delhi. I reside in Delhi, but I have a house in Mumbai and Chennai, but I'm unable to occupy it because of my employment in Delhi. So what can be the possible solution? Should I take, ma'am, Delhi house as self-occupied, as pakka self-occupied because I'm residing there, and Mumbai, Chennai mein I pick one? See, it does not go by your gut feeling. It should go by your tax sensible calculations. So how, from an assessee point of view, what would you prefer? In real life, we want more profits and more income, but when we talk from the tax perspective, we prefer that सबसे कम amount taxable, the minimum amount should get taxable, correct? Same thought process से we will see that what would be the taxable amount. That means what property should be taken as deemed let out, because जब वो let out होगा उसका gross annual value taxable hoga, right? The gross annual value would be taxable. But how do you pick which one should be let out? So उसमें सबसे पहले तीनों को assume कर लो, that assume each of them to be let out and calculate their net income from house property. सबको एज्यूम कर लो कि अगर वो लेट आउट होते तो उनकी इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी क्या होता, एंड सबको एज्यूम कर लो अगर वो सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी होती तो उनकी इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी क्या होता. एज्यूम इफ एवरी property is let out, what would have been the income from house property, and assume every property if self occupied, what would have been the income. Why you cannot directly do it? Because there would be municipal taxes benefits when we talk about let out property. There would be standard deduction when we talk about let out property, and when we talk about your self-occupied property, there would be ceiling limit of interest, right? So you have to take three situations. Now suppose अब आप बोलोगे कि मैम ग्रॉस एनुअल वैल्यू निकालने के लिए now you will say कि मैम GAV निकालने के लिए, okay, so sorry, not working. One second. Now you will say कि मैम GAV निकालने के लिए तो expected rent and actual rent चाहिए होता है, but मैम actual rent तो हमें पता नहीं because all of these are self-occupied. So my friends, when we're talking about deemed let out property, and I'm saying you to calculate as rough notes the let out value of each property, then that means you have to take your gross annual value as your expected rent. ठीक है, वो तो होगा आपके पास because those are market and law related matters, so वो तो you can easily calculate. So now if I tell you Mumbai का expected rent is per annum figures I'm telling you 7 lakh. Chennai ka it is 5 lakh. And Delhi ka it is 6,50,000. So it would be a very close fight. Municipal taxes paid during the year 10,000, 45,000, out of which 30,000 are for preceding years, and 40,000. Interest on loan for the year, यहाँ पे रिपेयर का लोन है which is say 40,000. Construction loan है जिसका interest during the year is coming to 1,25,000 and इसका acquisition loan है जिसका interest during the year is coming to 2,10,000. Now you tell me quickly what would be the let out income, as in what would be the income from house property assuming all these houses are let out. उनका let out value क्या हो जाएगा, or the income if each property is let out. Quickly tell me what would be the income from house property for each house. Take a moment. I'll also calculate. You also calculate. Everyone, please calculate it and drop in your answers. Darshan, I am talking about total income from house property. अगर ये let out होते, this is not right. 30% standard deduction भूल गए guys. अभी सबको let out assume करके उनका income from house property निकालो. Simple. भूल जाओ कि all of these are self-occupied. No, Ishan, no, not correct. NAV nahi, final income after interest and after your standard deduction. Okay, guys. So only one to give the correct answer by now is Kavita. Very, very, very good. Ishan, 453 nahi, 443. Sudhanshu has given the correct answer. सबको अभी actually में सब self occupied है. All the properties which we are discussing are self occupied, but I told you कि to compare which one you have to take the let out property, उसमें there are 3 steps involved. First, you compare that and assume that all the properties are let out. तो क्या income आता? If all the properties would have been let out, so Mumbai का क्या आता? 7 lakh. Expected rent would have been gross annual value. Less municipal taxes of 10,690 minus 30% and repair का पूरा interest का deduction मिल जाता 40,000. जिसने यहाँ पे 30,000 किया है, guys, वो 30,000 ceiling limit is in SOP. So income from let out property would be 4,43,000 if the Mumbai property would have been let out, right? Or now Chennai का same 5 lakh is the expected rent minus 45,000. NAV आ जाएगा. NAV में से minus 30% minus 1,25,000. So if the Chennai property is let out, this would be the deemed income until unless the actual rent is much higher. Okay. Now Delhi में 6,50,000 था minus 40,000, 610 minus 30%, and interest on loan would come to minus 2,10,000. There is no ceiling limits when we talk about let out property. So 2,17,000 Delhi का income हो गया. All these figures which you can see here, 443, 193, 500 and 2,17,000 are the figures that if the property would have been let out, this would have been the deemed income. Okay, अभी तीनों को हमने let out माना. अब तीनों को अगर मैं एसओपी मानूं तो व्हाट वुड हैव, अभी मान नहीं सकती, बट इफ आई हैव टू कैलकुलेट द सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी का वैल्यू इन दीज थ्री प्रॉपर्टीज, व्हाट वुड हैव बीन 30,000 मैक्सिमम, बिकॉज रिपेयर है, 40,000 का डिडक्शन है इंटरेस्ट का, बट 30,000 तक रिस्ट्रिक्टेड है. चेन्नई का 125 है, तो 125 अलाउ हो जाएगा इंटरेस्ट. दिल्ली का 2,10,000 है, तो 2 लाख अलाउ हो जाएगा. यहां तक कोई डाउट? अभी आई हैव नॉट डिक्लेयर दैट which one is DLOP and which one is SOP, which is self occupied property or deemed let out property. अभी तक I have just calculated the values. Now the third step is comparison and making permutation and combination of the scenarios. Now we will do that. But यहां तक किसी को कोई डाउट? Then only I will proceed आगे. प्रीति, जब हम let out property की बात करते हैं, there is no ceiling limit of 2 lakhs or 30,000, which that is only occupied, that is only available for SOP, or that is only applicable for SOPs. अभी तक I have not said which one is DLOP, which one is SOP. I have just said that assume what would we have been the income if they are let out, and in case we take them as self-occupied property, what would be the income from house property. Abhi tak we have just kept the figures ready. Now we have to make permutation and combination. Chale? Chalo. Now the final step is making permutation and combinations. Permutation and combinations kaise lenge? First scenario mein scenario 1 or case 1, taking Mumbai house as LOP, as a let out property, or DLOP I should say, and taking बाकी दोनों को सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड, चेन्नई एंड दिल्ली को SOP. ठीक है, ध्यान से सुनना गाइस, अगर ये समझ आ गया तो बहुत इजी है. नाउ अगर मैं मुंबई को डीम्ड लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी मांगती हूँ तो 4,43,000 वुड बी द इनकम, राइट, और बाकी दोनों को सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड मानती हूँ, so 1,25,000 would be the income loss from self-occupied property in Chennai and loss from self-occupied property in Delhi. But we remember that this maximum is allowed up to 2 lakhs. When we talk about self-occupied property, the maximum interest deduction which is allowed for construction or acquisition, provided other conditions are completed, is 2 lakhs. So total income from house property क्या आ गया मेरा? Income from 1, 2 and 3 properties, 1 taken to be deemed and another 2 taken to be self-occupied. 443 minus 2 lakh, 2,23,000. If I assume in the case 1, my Mumbai property to be deemed let out, okay? Now case 2, if I assume my Mumbai property to be self-occupied, Chennai property to be deemed let out property, and your Delhi property to be self-occupied, because maximum 2 self-occupied मान सकते हैं, तीसरे को deemed let out मानना पड़ेगा. अब deemed let out, what would be the deemed which property would be the deemed let out property would depend upon in the combination where I'm having the least income. Now if I assume Mumbai self property to be self-occupied, the income from house property would be 30,000. अगर इसको डीम लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी लेती हूँ तो 1,93,500, एंड अगर दिल्ली भी सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड जाता है तो 2 lakhs. बट रिस्ट्रिक्शन ऑफ दिस एंड दिस इज मैक्सिमम 2 lakhs. ये हमने लास्ट क्लास में भी डिड इट, राइट. सो 2 lakhs minus 1,93,500. यहाँ पे सिचुएशन ऑफ लॉस कम्स, विच इज So if I combine the income from 3 house property, so it comes to negative 6,500. See, income from house property means loss from house property also. So you must सोचना, I'm saying कि combined income from 3 property, I'm saying कि combined income from new letter property. I'm saying combine the final income including loss which has come from 3 properties. Now third scenario comes to, थर्ड सिनेरियो में मजा आएगा. Why? Because यहाँ पे दिल्ली मुंबई को एसओपी माना, चेन्नई को भी एसओपी माना एंड दिल्ली को डीम लेटर प्रॉपर्टी माना. मुंबई को अगर एसओपी मानेंगे तो लॉस कितना आएगा 30,000. यहाँ पे लॉस कितना आएगा 1,25,000. एंड डीम लेटर प्रॉपर्टी मानेंगे तो व्हाट वुड बी द इनकम 2,17,000. यहाँ पे 125 and 30 it is within the limit, so full losses would be allowed. So 217 minus 125 minus 30. 62,000 is coming as net income. Now, for an assessee, he wants to pay the least tax. So, what is the ideal scenario? The ideal scenario is scenario number 2, where the income is the lowest, which is in loss, 6,500 negative. By taking Mumbai property as self-occupied and Delhi property as self-occupied, and taking Chennai property as deemed letter property, the assessee, it's the optimized income, and that should be the case, and that should be your income from taking C as your deemed letter property and M in Mumbai and Delhi as your self-occupied property. अब आप बोलोगे प्राइम एफ से ही देखने से तो you would have made maybe your Chennai property only deemed letter property, because वहां पे आप बोलोगे कि मैम expected rent कम है. नहीं, ऐसे नहीं होता, because sometimes the municipal taxes are higher, sometimes the interest on loan is higher on some respective property, and sometimes you have to see the combination that by comparing the other two self-occupied property, what would be the maximum interest that would be allowed. So taking all those factors together, the best approach is first make a rough calculation of assuming all the 3 properties to be let out, and make a rough calculation ki if these properties are self-occupied, what would have been the income from house property. Now prepare the combinations, because maximum only up to 2 properties can be self-occupied. So take remaining as your deemed let out property. So take first 2 as self-occupied, third as deemed let out, then take first and third as a self-occupied, second as deemed let out, and the final scenario taking second and third as self-occupied and first as deemed let out. उसमें जिसमें भी सबसे कम income आएगा, that would be the ideal scenario. So my deemed let out property would be property of Chennai, and Mumbai and Delhi would be taken as self-occupied. Got it? Yes, Jitendra, maximum up to 2 properties can be taken as self-occupied. All of this is was discussed in the previous class. Please go refer to the previous class also. किसी को कोई doubt, you can write this question, take as a screenshot, whatever feels right. But combination बनाते time remember कि अगर आप 2 self occupied property ले रहे हो तो maximum 2 lakh तक इंटरेस्ट आएगा. अगर it's a combination of repairs and self occupied repairs and construction loan, repair को 30,000 को restriction करोगे, construction loan को 2 lakh. Both repair loans है तो 30,000 को restrict करके total भी 30,000. One is both are construction loan, तो respective to 2 lakh restrict करके total भी 2 lakh से ज्यादा नहीं होना चाहिए. This should be the checkpoint. Darshan, at your level, you will not get 4 houses का question. Guys, clear है या नहीं? Sorry, 243 आएगा, correct. Thanks. Thanks, Sushil. तो खुशी, income include losses also. So अगर आपका when we say in the tax term that income from house property, we or income from a specific head, we mean take loss also from a specific head. And SOP में हमेशा I told you either the income from house property would be nil, but if the loans are going on, it would be negative. The income from house property can never be positive when we talk about self-occupied properties. इनकम का मतलब लॉस भी होता है. ओके, करेक्ट सुशील, ऑप्शन 2 इज द बेस्ट कॉम्बिनेशन. So quickly, if a question of deemed letter of property comes, अब आपको कैसे पता चलेगा question is of deemed letter of property? It would be given to you in exam के ऐसे नहीं लिखा होगा calculate deemed letter of property. It will be given to you that 3 houses are there and all the 3 are self-occupied, or it would be given that 1 house is self-occupied by family and other 2 are vacant or could not be occupied because of so and so situation. So that means it's a question of calculating your income from house property, taking one as deemed let out property. ठीक है, उसमें क्या करोगे? First you will assume कि if these properties are let out, what would have been the income? उनको कैसे निकालोगे? Taking your expected rent as your gross annual value and other figures को जैसे आप let out property का करते हो, municipal taxes minus करते हो, you give standard deduction, you give interest का deduction, in with full without any ceiling limit, you will come to your income from let out property, right? Then you take that if these properties are self-occupied, what would have been their value? What would have been their total income from that property? You calculate it. Now prepare combinations, taking one as being let out, other 2 as self-occupied. Once you have come to all 3 combinations, pick the scenario where the income is the least, or you can say where the loss is the maximum. That would be your ideal scenario, and that would be your इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी. कहीं भी लॉ ये नहीं कहता अगर आप मुंबई वाला प्रॉपर्टी को डीम लेट आउट दिखा दोगे, नो वन वुड कम टू योर हाउस एंड से कि नहीं आपको तो चेन्नई दिखाना चाहिए था. नो, इफ इट्स योर विश, बट now since you would be becoming consultants and advising your clients, you should know that your aim is that the tax saving should be optimized. So in that case, you have to prepare a combination sheet and pick which one is the maximum taxable benefit wala option, that is where the income is least or the loss is maximum. Okay. जितेंद्र, यही तभी तो कर रहे हैं हम ये क्वेश्चन ताकि आपको पता चले कि व्हाट इज डीम लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी. क्वेश्चन नहीं बोलेगा कि पिक डीम लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी. क्वेश्चन विल से कि कैलकुलेट द इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी फॉर मिस्टर सो एंड वहां पे क्वेश्चन में दिया होगा 3 सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी. यू हैव टू पिक द डीम लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी. Actual में guys, Kavita and everyone, actual में all these 3 are self-occupied, but we cannot claim for the income tax purpose more than 2 properties as self-occupied, that is, we cannot claim the gross annual value as nil for more than 2 properties. 1 or 2 तक allowed है, but जहां 2 से ज्यादा आ जाएगा, we have to apply the concepts of deemed let out property, and we have to pick which one is deemed let out. So they will say what would be the ideal scenario. किसको pick करोगे, वो तभी पता चलेगा ना जब सबको combination में एक साथ लोगे. Then only you will get to know, no? Tax liability, Darshan, all heads of income, abhi it's a far thing to do. Don't jump. Dheere dheere you will get to know all those things. Koi doubt, guys? Jitendra, Kavita, anyone? ये restriction क्यों किया गवर्नमेंट ने? Because ऐसे तो everyone, now people who are wealthy enough, they have these properties not for the letter purpose, but for their own leisure and self-occupancy purpose. So these people would show all properties as self-occupied and will claim loss in case of all self-occupied property if the loan is going on, correct? So to restrict those undue benefits to people who have lots of properties and just for self-occupancy, उनको restrict करने के लिए they said कि we will only take only 2 of your properties as self-occupied. Others को you have to assume that they have let out, and based on assuming provisions you have to offer us the income. अगर आपका सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी का कॉन्सेप्ट इज क्लियर, लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी का कॉन्सेप्ट इज क्लियर, डीम लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी का कैलकुलेशन इज जस्ट अ बेसिक कैलकुलेशन एंड मेक द कॉम्बिनेशंस. But if your self-occupied property ka concept is not clear or LOP ka concept is not clear, then there would be a mistake here also. So please let out करते time उसको let out समझो, self-occupied करते time interest के ceiling limit समझो, combination time पे focus की interest should for both self-occupied property combined would not cross the certain limit. Okay. Next scenario, my friend, where we'll be talking about is how to compute income from house property. अभी तक हमने क्या 3 scenarios करे? If the property is let out during the year, if property is self-occupied during the year, and if more than 2 properties are self-occupied during the year, then deemed let out provisions would apply. Now, third, or I should say fourth scenario would be a scenario where we will talk about a property partly let out and partly self-occupied. एक और सिनेरियो होता है a part of property let out and a part of the same property self-occupied. दोनों में difference क्या है? Here we are talking about a same property which was in the first part or say or some part of the previous year was let out, and the same property was once vacant was self-occupied. मतलब कि पहले उसमें tenant रहते थे, फिर tenant जब गए you self-occupied it. This is the meaning. Or you can say first it was being self-occupied, then tenant came. Anything. It's not that first six months divide karna. It can be 9-3 combination, 4 and 8 combination. But the same property first was let out or first was self-occupied and then later it was let out or later it was self-occupied, as the case may be. Same property for that particular part of you. जो second scenario मैंने below the line लिखा है, दैट इज कि प्रॉपर्टी का एक पार्ट लेट आउट है एंड प्रॉपर्टी का दूसरा पार्ट सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड है. दैट मीन्स सपोज आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट a property where the first starting a portion, say 2/3 portion is let out property and then 1/3 portion is self occupied. दोनों में पहले डिफरेंस समझ आया, बिकॉज देन ओनली यू विल बी एबल टू कम टू द इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी. फर्स्ट सिनेरियो में सेम प्रॉपर्टी में पहले देयर आर टेनेंट्स और पहले इट इज सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड एंड देन टेनेंट्स कम और देन इट वाज सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड, विच एवर इज द केस. सेम प्रॉपर्टी है, वहां पे दो प्रॉपर्टीज नहीं है, दो पोर्शंस नहीं है, सेम पोर्शन. यहाँ पे प्रॉपर्टी का फर्स्ट एक पोर्शन इज लेट आउट एंड एक पोर्शन इज सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड एट द सेम टाइम. दोनों का कैलकुलेशन कैसे करना है, हाउ द वैल्यूएशन वुड डिफर, लेट्स अंडरस्टैंड. फर्स्ट विल पिक अप द केस whereby the property is partly let out and partly self occupied. Our first aim is to pick what? Our first aim is to pick the gross annual value. Income from house property nikalte time, the first step is to calculate the gross annual value. So when there is a situation of partly let out and partly self-occupied, you will compare your expected rent, which would be for the entire year. That means municipal valuation, that means fair market value, that means standard rent for the entire year को higher and lower करके come to the expected rent, and you will take the actual rent received or receivable for that let out period. So for example, my expected rent comes to 15,000 per month. And my actual rent let out period was only 7 months. And it was let out at a rate of, say, 17,000. So expected rent आप entire year का लोगे, $1,80,000, and actual rent you will only take for the let out period, $1,19,000, and in most of the scenarios, expected rent would be your gross annual value. In most of the scenarios, so 180 हो जाएगा. उसके बाद the provisions को same. Once you calculate the gross annual value, municipal taxes का deduction मिल जाएगा. Then you will get your net annual value. इसमें से standard deduction and interest on loan without any ceiling limit would be allowed. Okay, and then you will calculate your income from house property. Sorted? ये वाला सिनेरियो समझ आया, पार्टली लेट आउट एंड पार्टली सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड पे. यस, अब आप बोलोगे कि मैम ये तो गलत है, लेट आउट तो सिर्फ 7 months के लिए हुआ. नहीं, the provision says when the gross annual value is taken, you have to calculate the expected rent for the entire year and compare it with the actual rent or rent receivable for the let out period. Okay, बहुत सिंपल है, no other problem in this. समझ आया? ये वाला सिनेरियो समझ आया गाइस? So now let us take one question quickly. 1 second. Let me quickly come to a scenario. So if you will see on the screen, Srimati Raj Lakshmi owns a house property at Adyar in Chennai. The municipal value is 5 lakhs, fair rent is 420, standard rent is 480. The property was let out for 50,000 per month up to December 2022. यानी कितने टाइम के लिए? Up to December 2022, that means for 9 months. Rent for the months of November and December could not be realized in spite of owner's effort. That means this is unrealized rent. All the conditions prescribed under Rule 4 are satisfied. That means उसने सारे efforts किए unrealized rent को recover करने के लिए, but everything went in vain. She paid municipal taxes at 12%. Municipal taxes, guys, always would be the 12% of the municipal valuation. She had paid interest of 25,000 during the year for the amount borrowed for repairs for the house property. Okay. Compute the income. Let's compute it, friends. सबसे पहले what would be the gross annual value here? The gross annual value को निकालने के लिए first what would be expected rent? Expected rent, my friends, is 420 and 5 में 5 is higher, 5 and 480 में 480 is the lowest. 480 is the expected rent. What is the actual rate? Actual rent is 50,000 into 9. 450. So what would be my gross annual value? 480 would be the gross annual value. You can take both the approach. Actual rent में से gross unrealized rent को minus कर लो, that is minus 1 lakh. या you can, as per the income tax return form, once you calculate gross annual value, then you reduce your unrealized rent of 1 lakh. 480 minus 1 lakh minus municipal taxes paid. Municipal taxes is 12% of municipal valuation. So 5 lakh ka 12% has been paid as municipal taxes. 60,000 आया. 320 में से minus 30% minus 25,000. $199. I hope it's clear. Let's see. So I have taken the note wala method, which is my alternate method, and the answer is coming correctly 199. Koi doubt, guys? Yes. Purely self-occupied property में रुशिता 30,000 and 2 lakh का limit applicable होगा, which is a portion or the property purely self-occupied. Once it is partly let out, partly self-occupied, municipal taxes का भी deduction है, standard deduction भी है, and your interest का भी पूरा deduction है. But at the same time, the disadvantage is कि आप expected rent से compare कर रहे हो, which is for the whole year. So अगर ये इंटरेस्ट ऑन लोन इनफैक्ट 45,000 भी होता रिपेयर के केस में भी, still पूरा 45,000 would have been allowed. Yes, Bhumika, because I told you कि how do you compute, हर एक का gross annual value निकालने का तरीका is different. How do you compute GAV in such a scenario, which is this, is you take the, अगर partly lettered and partly self-occupied case है, you will take your gross annual value as expected rent for the entire year or actual rent for the let out period, and whichever is higher would be your GAV. Now these are different scenarios. पहला scenario हमने करा a let out property for the entire year where the expected rent and the actual rent for the entire year are compared. Then we did self-occupied property where the gross annual value is nil, but वहाँ पे interest का ceiling limits है. Then we did deemed let out property का provisions where I taught that assume all of these as let out, calculate the value if they are self-occupied, prepare combination that come to the optimal combination. Then fourth scenario is when a property is partly let out and partly self-occupied. मतलब a part of the year it was let out and the part of the year it is self-occupied. So that is where you will compare the gross annual, where you will come to the gross annual value by comparing the expected rent for the entire year and actual rent for the let out period. Got it? Tiku, कोई doubt? Municipal taxes are always a percentage of municipal valuation. Drisya, at an exam, you can follow both the methods, but please write on your notes if you're following the second method that the gross annual value and your net, or you have come to your net annual value by taking the unrealized rent from the gross annual value, and this has been done as per the income tax return form. Vishwanath Reddy, I told you that why people are paying tax on deemed let out property, because government says that those से ज़्यादा self-occupied नहीं ले सकते. And I told the reason कि wealthy लोग क्या करेंगे, they would be investing and they would be claiming losses on house property. So to make them not take the advantage of this unduly, that's why they have came up with the provisions for deemed let out property. Because for any middle class person or any middle taxpayer, having two properties are more than enough. अभी तो फिर भी 2 है. When we used to study, only one self-occupied property was allowed. Amit Kumar, again, see the scenario. A portion is let out and the portion is self-occupied, or we're talking about a same house which is for the year, for some part is let out and for the year for some part is self-occupied. अगर for the year वाला concept है तो ये gross annual valuation चलेगी, which we saw. Okay, up now we come to a case where another case where there is one house. ये पूरा एक house है. Okay, let me draw it better. This is one house, but a part of this is let out, as in a portion of it is let out and a portion of this is self-occupied. Say front portion, 2/3 portion is let out and 1/3 portion is self-occupied. So if a situation is like this and the portion in themselves are sufficient enough to take as a single unit, so you will treat each portion as an independent unit. So यानी 2/3 को आप LOP मानोगे and 1/3 को SOP मानोगे. But ma'am, how would be the calculations happen? You will divide all your valuations, which is your expected rent valuations, on this 2/3 1/3 basis. इंटरेस्ट को 2/3 1/3 बेसिस पे डिवाइड कर दोगे, म्युनिसिपल टैक्सेस को 2/3 1/3 के बेसिस पे डिवाइड करके यू विल क्लेम इट. मैम एग्जांपल, सो अब यहाँ पे हम वी विल टेक अनदर केस वेयर house property, a portion is let out and a portion is self-occupied. अभी हमने जो recent case किया, it was the same part or the same area we are talking about, and that was self-occupied and let out for the part of the year. यहाँ पे एक प्रॉपर्टी के दो डिविजन कर दी, एक पोर्शन लेट आउट हो गया, एक सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड हो गया. अब उस केस में हाउ डू वी कैलकुलेट इट? लेट्स सी. प्रेम owns a house in Madras During the previous year 2022-23, 2/3 portion was self-occupied and 1/3 portion was let out for residential purposes at a rent of 8,000 per month. Municipal value आपको entire property की दी होगी, 1/3 portion की नहीं, okay? Municipal value of the property is 3 lakh per annum. Fair rent is 270 and standard rent is 330. He paid municipal taxes at 10% of the municipal value. अगर ये 10% of municipal value नहीं भी लिखा हुआ and only 10% is written, then also you will take it off the municipal value only. Compute Prem's income from house property for assessment year 23-24. Let's start, guys. So whenever I told you, whenever there are same property के two portion and they are in themselves sufficient enough to claim it as one portion independently, तो हर एक portion को आप अलग अलग unit मानोगे. You will claim each portion as different unit. So 2/3 को एक unit मानोगे and 1/3 को एक unit मानोगे. Now first of all, when I talk about self-occupied property, so यहाँ पे क्या होगा? What is the total interest? The total interest of the property is 120. So for SOP, what would be allowed? JV is nil. SOP portion, that is 2/3 portion, that is, let's say, unit 1. GAV would be nil, everything would be nil, only deduction of 120 would be allowed, but 120 is the loan for the entire property. So 2/3 portion का क्या हो जाएगा? 120 is the interest for the entire property. So 2/3 का क्या हो जाएगा? 80,000. So 80,000 would be my loss from house property. ठीक है? Then deemed let out property में you have to take your municipal valuations and everything at 1/3. या तो पहले let's come to expected rent 3 lakh and 270 में 3 lakh is higher, 3 lakh and 330 में 3 lakh is lower. So 3 lakh is the municipal valuation for the entire property, bringing down the 1/3. 3 lakh is the expected rent for the entire property. The expected rent for the 1/3 portion would be 1 lakh. Now expected rent is 1 lakh. Actual rent is 8 into 12, 96. What is my gross annual value? My gross annual value is 1 lakh. Now इसमें से let's start reducing. सबसे पहले municipal taxes reduce होंगे. Again, municipal taxes at 10%, which is 3 lakh का 10% is for entire property. But हमें खाली कितने का करना है? 1/3 property का. Deemed let out नहीं, this is 1/3. Why I'm writing deemed? For the let out property, which is 1/3 portion, is 10,000. 30,000 is for the entire property. Let out property का 10,000 हो जाएगा. So 1 lakh minus 10, 90,000 में से you will reduce your 30%, 63,000 आ जाएगा. Minus interest on loan. Interest on loan यहाँ पे कितना loan होगा guys? 1/3 property का 40,000. So your total income from house property here, पहले let out self occupied property से आया 80,000 और let out property से आया 63 minus 40, 23,000. So my net income from house property would be negative 57,000, which is 80 negative plus 23. So can I say when the portions are divided, you have to take each portion as an independent unit and calculate the income from house property for each independent unit. Just remember that all the kharchas, the expected rent, the interest, the municipal taxes would be divided into the proportion in which the area is. If 2/3 is for the SOP, 2/3 के हिसाब से सारा SOP का calculation होगा for municipal taxes and interest. If 2/3 इज द एलओपी वाला, तो फिर उसको 2/3 पे आ जाओगे. अब यहाँ पे टू इन दिस क्वेश्चन इट वाज 2/3 फॉर एसओपी, 1/3 फॉर एलओपी. सो ऑल द कैलकुलेशंस हैव बीन डन बाय 1/3. एक्चुअल रेंट को 1/3 नहीं किया बिकॉज एक्चुअल रेंट वो लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी का ही है. बाकी सबको 1/3 कर दिया, एक्सपेक्टेड रेंट को, म्युनिसिपल टैक्सेस को, इंटरेस्ट को, बिकॉज दीज वर गिवन फॉर द एंटायर प्रॉपर्टी. It can be like two floors का question, that first floor is let out, second floor is self occupied. Then each floor को you will take it as independent unit, and you have to see the question में whether the municipal valuation and etc is given for the entire building, that is first and second floor combined, or it is given for the first floor as in the let out part only. So just focus on those things. दोनों scenarios में फर्क समझ आया? Any doubt यहाँ पे? Anyone has any doubt? Illustration number 9 and I think we did illustration number 7. दोनों में डिफरेंस समझ आया? पोर्शंस का फर्क है गाइस. तो अभी तक हमने क्या क्या सिनेरियोस कवर कर लिया? अगेन व्हेन द प्रॉपर्टी इज लेट आउट फॉर द एंटायर ईयर, सबसे लास्ट क्लास में वही किया था. इन द प्रॉपर्टी इज सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड फॉर द एंटायर ईयर. देन वी केम अप टू द सिनेरियो द सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी, देयर आर मोर देन टू सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी. देन अब मोर देन टू सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी, आई एम नॉट सेइंग कि गाइस अगर 3 प्रॉपर्टीज हैं, एक लेट आउट है एंड 2 सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी है, इन एक्चुअल डीमिंग प्रोविजंस मत लगा देना, बिकॉज 3 properties is not the criteria. 3 properties, or I should say more than 2 properties should be self-occupied is the criteria. अब suppose a person has 4 houses, out of which one is actually let out. तो इसको तो actual let out मानेंगे. Now 3 में you will see which has to be taken as your deemed let out property. ऐसा मत करना कि जो actual let out है उसको भी deemed let out मान लो. No. The criteria is if you have more than 3 self-occupied more than 2 self-occupied property. Okay, the criteria is not having more than 2 houses. अगर आपके पास 3 हाउस हैं, तीनों लेट आउट हैं, no problem. उसमें just focus on the gross annual value. But when you have more than 2 properties as self-occupied, ये मत बोल देना कि मैम ने तो कहा था कि 3 प्रॉपर्टीज का क्वेश्चन आएगा, एक को डीएलओपी मानना है. 3 प्रॉपर्टीज मतलब अगर तीनों सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड है तो. ओके, then we did a property which is let out during the year and self-occupied during the year. Then we did a property, a portion of which is let out and a portion of which is self-occupied. पहले आप अपना एक्सपेक्टेड रेंट निकालो कभी था, उसको फिर 1/3 प्रोपोर्शन करके देन कंपेयर इट विद द एक्चुअल रेंट. There is no limit on number of let out property. You can put any number of properties which you have as your let out. Now we come to the last or second last scenario you can say, and it is a very important scenario. ठीक है, अब ये थोड़ा टेक्निकल है, चले आगे. इफ इन रियलिटी जितेंद्र 3 में से 2 लेट आउट है, तो आप 2 को लेट आउट मानोगे, 1 को सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड मानोगे. वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द सिनेरियोस व्हेन मोर देन 2 आर सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड. तभी तो डीम्ड लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी को डीएलओपी कहा जाता है, थर्ड कैटेगरी. प्लीज लिसन टू द फर्स्ट क्लास where I told that there are 3 major categories: SOP, DLOP and your let out property. DLOP का मतलब ही ये है कि this is, और आप उसको DLOP में ही दिखाओगे. In your income tax return form there is segment of deemed let out property. There is an option to select the properties SOP, deemed let out property, or a let out property, and you will offer it as a deemed income only, that this is not actually my income but I'm offering because I have more than 2 self-occupied properties. Okay, आपको वो रिटर्न फॉर्म में यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू सेलेक्ट थर्ड प्रॉपर्टी को एज एसओपी. वहां पे चेक है कि यू कैन ओनली सेलेक्ट अप टू 2 प्रॉपर्टीज एज एसओपी. Partly let out, partly self-occupied में AR is less to expected rent, which Vaishali most likely would be. 19% of scenarios में it would be, because वो partly let out and partly self occupied है. Expected rent आप full year का ले रहे हो, actual rent आप खाली let out period का ले रहे हो. So which would be the scenario? तो उस case में your GAP would be the higher amount. Now if the question is of unrealized rent also, so it is on you. There are 2 approaches. Once you calculate GAP, then you reduce unrealized rent, which I didn't solve, or you calculate actual rent में से unrealized rent minus करके then you compare it with the expected rent and then you come to GAP. दोनों में से whichever approach you follow is accepted by the institute. Clear? Telling guys, now for the next 15 minutes I don't want your mind to go here and there. अगर कोई अभी भी doubt है, please take it, because next concept is again technical. चले? Okay. The next scenario which we are taking up, friends, is a scenario where a property is let out during the year or during the part of the year and is vacant during the part of the year. मतलब a property was let out say for 8 months, then the tenant left and now remaining 4 months में वो vacant थी. एक सिनेरियो है कि let out property was let out for 9 months or 8 months and then we came and self-occupied or we use it for self-purpose. This is different from that scenario because यहाँ पे the concept of vacancy happens. हो सकता है that tenants do not stay for the entire year. There can be vacancy, right? There can be vacancy. उस vacancy को हम self-occupied नहीं बोलते, उस vacancy को एक general vacancy बोलते. So this scenario is when a property is let out and vacant for part of the year. A property is let out and vacant for the part of the year. In every scenario, your focus is first to calculate GAV. If GAV is properly calculated, your answer would come correct, because uske baad the reductions are very simple. Municipal taxes paid during the year, you have to remember 30% reduction is there, and then interest reduction is there. But if GAV is calculated wrong, no matter if your entire other things are correct, it would not come as the correct answer. So focus is to GAV. Har ek scenario mein I focused on calculating the GAV correctly. So GAV here, as in my gross annual value, in case a property is let out during the year or it is vacant during the year, hamesha what do we compare? Expected rent and actual rent, correct? And whichever is higher, you take that. Correct? This is what you have done. But my friends, in this case, when a property is let out during the year and is vacant during the other part of the year, you can take your actual rent as your GAV. You can directly take your actual rent as your GAV, provided, I'm saying again and again and again, that actual rent is lower just because of vacancy. Had the vacancy would have been for, had the let out would have been for the entire year, actual rent would have been higher than expected rent if it would have been for the entire year. अब ये मैंने क्या लिखा, ये तो ऊपर से गया मैम, कुछ समझ ही नहीं आया. Let's take it case by case. My expected rent is coming to 15,000. My actual rent for 9 months only, the rent was the tenant stayed. After that, they vacated it. So my actual rent per month was 16,000 per month. Okay. अब अभी तक आपने जो पढ़ा है, till now what you have studied, that you have to compare expected rent for the entire year with actual rent for the let out period. Now expected rent for the entire year comes to 15,000 into 12, which is 1,80,000. Versus actual rent for 9 months would come to 16,000 into 9, which is 1,44,000. But I am telling you, in this case, that is when let out during the part of the year and the remaining part it was vacant, you can take your gross annual value as 144. Not directly. यहाँ पे आपको चेक लगाना है, that is you can take your gross annual value as actual rent for the let out period, provided अगर मैं actual rent, ये if situation है, अगर मैं actual rent for the entire year लेती, if actual rent for the entire year would have been taken, which is 16,000 into 12, if the property was let out for the entire year, then my GAV would have been actual rent, right? Just because of वो vacancy हो गया, and just because now the tenant has left, just because of that vacancy, the actual rent is coming lower. Otherwise, if the property was let out for the entire year, the actual rent would have been the gross annual value. अब गलती क्या हो गई, गड़बड़ क्या होगी, the tenant left and the owner has no fault in it. Tenant left and the property was vacant. उस वजह से खाली GAV expected rent आ रहा है, but that should not be taken. So the Income Tax Act says if the property is let out during the year and it is vacant for the part of the year, you can take your actual rent as your gross annual value, which we take, provided had the property would have been given on rent for the entire year, actual rent would only have been the gross annual value. तभी आप इस केस में GAV को actual rent ले सकते हो for the 9 months. मैम again एक और सिचुएशन लेते हैं. अब मेरा expected rent is 15,000, ठीक है, per month, and actual rent is coming to 14,000 per month. Now focus here, guys. This is for 9 months. अब मैं अगर GAV compare करूं, it would be 180 versus 14 into 9, which is 126. अब इस केस में I will not take my gross annual value to be actual rent. Why so, ma'am? I'll tell you. I will take my gross annual value to be expected rent. Why? Because, my friends, if I would have taken the actual rent for the entire year also, if I would have taken the actual rent for the entire year also, तब भी अगर लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी एंटायर ईयर के लिए होता तब भी मेरा ग्रॉस एनुअल वैल्यू 180 आता, राइट? तब भी मेरा ग्रॉस एनुअल वैल्यू वुड हैव बीन 180 व्हिच इज इक्वल टू एक्सपेक्टेड रेट. तो वैकेंसी की वजह से लोअर नहीं हो रहा वो अदरवाइज भी अगर मैं एंटायर ईयर का भी लेती my actual rent, if I would have taken the actual rent for the entire year also, then also the gross annual value would have been expected rate. Correct? इस केस में तो in that case, now when the property is let out only for the part of the year it is vacant, the gross annual value would be equal to expected rate. But the case which is on your right hand side, which is this case, यहाँ पे gross annual value को हमने actual rent क्यों लिया? Why? Because if the property would have been there for the entire, if the property would have been let out for the entire year, then in that case, friends, the actual rent would have been the gross annual value. But वो इसलिए अभी actual rent gross annual value नहीं आ रही because 9 months का टेनेंसी पीरियड है, 9 months का टेनेंसी पीरियड है एंड 3 months का वेकेंसी पीरियड है, इसलिए एक्चुअल रेंट ग्रॉस एनुअल वैल्यू नहीं आ पा रहा था अगर हम कंपेयर करें. सो दिस इज अ जेन्युइन केस. That's why in such genuine case you can take your gross annual value to be your actual rent, to be your actual rent. If it's a genuine case, यानी अगर मैं पूरे साल का भी लेती तब भी actual rent GAV होता, तो अब वैकेंसी की वजह से अगर कम आ रहा है तब I will take GAV as actual rent. But if I would have taken the actual rent for the entire year also, if scenario में, then also GAV would have been the expected rent. क्योंकि मेरा actual rent lower है, तो अगर मैं लेट आउट पीरियड एंटायर ईयर का भी होता तब ऑल्सो माई एक्सपेक्टेड रेट वुड हैव बीन द जेवी, करेक्ट? उसमें वैकेंसी की वजह से सिर्फ कम नहीं आ रहा, जनरली ऑल्सो जेवी वुड हैव बीन द एक्सपेक्टेड रेट. तो उस केस में इवन नाउ इफ द वैकेंसी इज फॉर 9 months, जीएवी फॉर द एंटायर ईयर वुड बी एक्सपेक्टेड रेट फॉर द एंटायर ईयर. बट यहाँ पे दिस वॉज अ जेन्युइन केस वेयर इफ the actual let out period would have been 12 months, my GAV would have been the actual rent. So since it's a genuine case, in this case, even if the GAV, even if while computing GAV expected rent is higher, the actual rate would be taken as your gross annual value. अब एक quick question करेंगे, उससे it would be more clear. ये देखो यहाँ पे भी क्या लिखा हुआ है? Compute ER, compute actual rent. Actual rent would be for the let out period. Compare ER for the entire period with actual rent for the let out period. ठीक है? If actual rent is lower than ER due to vacancy, then actual rent is the GAV. If actual rent is lower than ER due to other reasons, then ER, the expected rent would be the GAV. अगर वो सिर्फ वैकेंसी की वजह से लोअर आ रही है, बट अगर पूरे साल के लिए लेते, the GAV would have been the actual rate for the entire year. So in this case, since it's a genuine case, GAV would be the actual rate for the let out period. However, in spite of vacancy, if the actual rent is higher than ER, then the actual rent is GAV. Got it? अब एक क्वेश्चन करते हैं so that it is clear. जिसमें people had a doubt at the starting of the class where the answer was not matching. Ganesh has a property whose municipal valuation is 250, fair rent is 2 lakhs, and standard rent fixed by Rent Control Act is 2,10,000. What is the expected rent for the entire year? Generally, all these valuations would be given for the entire year. 250 and 2 में 2 250 and 10 में 210. So 210 is the expected rent. Okay. The property was let out for a rent of 20,000 per month. However, the tenant vacated on 31st January. Vacancy period is 10 months. Okay. So actual rent for let out period, which is 10 months, is coming to 2 lakhs. Unrealized rent was 20,000 and all conditions prescribed by Rule 4 are satisfied. He paid municipal taxes at 8% of municipal valuation. Interest on borrowed capital is 65,000. Okay. Now, I have always told you that GAV would be expected rent versus actual rent for the let-out period, whichever is higher. Expected rent 210 है versus actual rent 2 lakh है. So आप बोलोगे कि मैम 210 is the higher thing. But here, since it's a partly let out and partly vacant wala case, the tenant vacated the house, partly vacant wala case, उसमें you will see अपने माइंड में या एक रफ जगह कि अगर एक्चुअल रेंट इंटायर पीरियड के लिए होता तो एक्चुअल रेंट ही जीएवी आता, राइट? जस्ट बिकॉज वो वेकेंट हो गया तभी वो एक्चुअल रेंट का वैल्यू लो आ रहा है. जस्ट बिकॉज द हाउस गॉट वेकेंट, ओनली because of that reason the actual rent is getting lower. Otherwise it is a correct situation. Actual rent would have been the GAV. So in this case, just because of vacancy only the actual rent is getting lower than the expected rent. So my GAV here would be actual rent, which is equal to 2 lakh. Now GAV में से unrealized rate minus कर दिया 20,000 का 180 आया. 180 में से म्युनिसिपल टैक्सेस माइनस कर दिया ऑफ 8% minus 8% of 250. $160 minus 30% minus your interest on borrowed capital 65,000. So my net income from house property is coming to 47,000. किसी को कहीं डाउट? ये वाला केस बहुत टिपिकल केस है गाइस. Focus on the difference of this case and tell now if you have any doubt. एक बारी आंसर देखो, रीजन समझो प्लीज. Everyone, is it clear? Jitendra, you can get it through Vecna. So before going on break, I will repeat again. This is a typical scenario where let out property is vacant for the part of the year. मतलब it is let out and it is vacant for part of the year. Generally क्या होता है, if it is let out for entire period, what you do? Entire period मतलब for the entire year, what you do? You compare your GAV to get to your GAV, you compare your expected rent for the entire with actual rent for the entire year. I'm not plugging in the provisions of unrealized rent. This is what you do, and whichever is higher becomes your GAV. Correct? जो भी इनमें से हायर अमाउंट होगा, दिस इज व्हाट यू डू. बट सिंस वैकेंसी, अब एक जेन्युइन सिचुएशन है कि वैकेंसी की वजह से किसी को एक्चुअल रेंट कम मिल रहा है. एक तो उसको लॉस ऑफ इनकम हो गया बिकॉज टेनेंट छोड़ के चला गया, राइट, द टेनेंट लेफ्ट वन, तो एक लॉस ऑफ इनकम हो गया. तो जीएवी इन दैट केस वुड बी द एक्चुअल रेंट फॉर द लेट आउट पीरियड. एक्चुअल रेंट फॉर द लेट आउट पीरियड provided अगर मैं actual rent for the entire period लेती, if the actual rent would have been taken for the entire period, it would have been a higher value than your expected rent. Then only actual rent for the let out period in this case would be your JV. मतलब अगर अभी कंपेयर करूं expected rent and actual rent को, and expected rent higher आ रहा होगा because यहाँ पे naturally this is for 12 months and this is for say 10 months or for let out period, right? But वो expected rent higher आ रहा होगा in this case which we saw. But बाबा वो क्यों higher आ रहा है? Because ये 10 months का है. अगर यही 12 months का होता तो actual rent would be the higher person. So just because of vacancy, actual rent is coming lower. Just because of vacancy, the actual rent is coming lower. तो मैं GAV को ER नहीं मान सकती. I cannot take my GAV as expected rent because vacancy की वजह से only the actual rent is lower. Otherwise full year का होता तो actual rent would have been the gross annual value. Correct? So इसलिए in such situations you can take actual rent as your let out period, actual rent of let out period as your gross annual value. अगर for the entire year लेती तब actual rent higher आता, तभी in this case GAV for the let out period को ही actual rent होगा. Why? Because genuine case है. But एक case वैसा भी हो सकता है कि where expected rent would have been higher even if actual rent would have been taken for 12 months. That means चाहे vacancy 1 month का होता, 2 month का होता, 3 months का होता, does not matter, expected rent higher आता ही आता, क्योंकि actual rent अगर मैं पूरे साल का भी ले लूं तब भी expected rent higher आता. तो उस केस में GAV मेरा क्या हो जाएगा? Expected rent. What would have been my GAV in that case? The expected rent, even if I take the actual rent for the entire period also, but since in those scenarios, if actual rent is taken for the entire period also, expected rent is higher, so GAV would have been expected rent. So it's not just because of vacancy, expected rent higher आ रहा है, वो genuinely भी expected rent ही higher था. But इस scenario में just because of vacancy, expected rent higher आ रहा है. That's why GAV would be the actual rent for the let out period, because this is a genuine case and vacancy की वजह से only it is getting lower. Otherwise, if it would have been for the entire period, it would have been the higher amount. So that's why, owing to genuinity of vacancy, that's why it is getting lower. Then only you will take your GAV as your actual rent for the let out period. Yes, due to alternate method of Diksha, unrealized rent, the income will be affected because you would be calculating it as per the institute, as per the law. But जब आप final return form में डालोगे, it would be different. So it's always better to follow the return form approach, but from the law approach, it is better to go for your reducing it from the actual rent first and then comparing it. Expected rent actual rent के equal है तो GAV कुछ भी हो, does not matter. तब उस केस में आप एक्चुअल रेंट फॉर द एंटायर ईयर के लिए कह रहे हो तो एक्चुअल रेंट वुड हैव बीन योर एक्चुअल रेंट फॉर द लेट आउट पीरियड वुड बी योर actual rent for the let out period would be your gross annual value. तो गाइस क्वेश्चन में अगेन कहीं नहीं लिखा हुआ कंप्यूट जेवी, क्वेश्चन में लिखा हुआ कंप्यूट इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी. यू हैव टू पिक which scenario is suitable, whether it's a scenario whether it's a scenario of let out during the part of the year and vacant for the other part, whether it's a scenario of let out during the part of the year and self-occupied, whether it's a scenario of team let out provisions, whether it's a scenario of portion is self-occupied and a portion is let out, then you have to put in your concepts of gross annual value. I must say the institute has done exceptional work when they have segregated each scenario and given you illustrations basis each scenario. So please do follow your institute module to complete it. Okay? सुधांशु स्टेप 4 में उन्होंने अनरियलाइज्ड रेंट माइनस करके फिर एक्चुअल रेंट को एक्सपेक्टेड रेंट से कंपेयर करा है. I would say you can go to the simple approach where first take actual rent and expected rent, actual rent for the let out period versus expected rent for the entire period. GAV would be actual rent provided अगर actual rent for the entire period होता तब भी वो GAV होता. Only in that situation GAV for the actual rent for the let out period would be considered. Got it? Now we will quickly take a 5-minute break. Break के बाद we will start co-ownership. We will pick up a scenario of stock in trade, and we will pick up the concept of deemed ownership and unrealized rent recovery. So just 4 concepts away from completing a concept of income from house property. Quickly meet me after 5-10 minutes. Thank you so much. So welcome back after the break, guys. There are a few questions, ma'am. Unless then later, firstly check on AR or year for full year, then for a AR for month, occupied included unrealized rent. Ma'am, example is 480 and rent is year is 48,000 and then for 10 months LOP is 50,000 per month and unrealized is 50,000, then GAV. See, Vaishali, आपने question you have asked for partly self-occupied and partly let out, right? My concept here is that जो अभी हमने just before the break the concept we read was partly let out and partly vacant. It is not partly let out and partly self-occupied. If it is, I'll pick up both the case which you have shared. Just 1 second. So friends, Vishali have shared certain case. First, she said that expected rent per month दिया हुआ, वैसे expected rent always आपको annum का दिया होगा, but expected rent per month है 48,000. Okay, and actual rent she's saying is 50,000. First scenario करते हैं where if it's a case of partly let out and unrealized rent है of 2 months. Okay, दोनों में अब आपको फर्क समझ आ जाएगा. फर्स्ट सिनेरियो करते हैं where it's a partly let out and partly vacant case. The one which we did just before the break. Now, इसमें expected rent is coming to 48,000 into 12, which is 576. ठीक है? Versus 50,000 actually it is for 10 months period, correct? Oh. Actual rent is for 10 months period, which is coming to 15 to 10, 50,000, 5 lakhs. Okay. This is for 12 months. Expected rent हमें लेना, actual rent is for 10 months. Now, partly let out, partly vacant के केस में my GAV आप कहोगे मैम आपने हमेशा कंपेयर करने को बोला नहीं, have asked that pick the higher one. But in this case, I will say कि GAV can be actual rent for let out period, which is 5 lakh, provided I will do a mini check here. कि if I would have taken the let out period for the entire year, my actual rent would have been 6 lakhs. So my, in this case, actual rent is coming lower just because of vacancy, correct? ये 12 months है, ये 10 months है. Just because वो 10 months का लिया, इसलिए वो lower आ रहा है. अगर वो full year का लेती तो higher आता, guys. So it's a genuine case, and hence I can now pick a case where the actual rent of let out period becomes my gross annual value. अभी 5 lakhs आ गया, उसमें से I will reduce the actual unrealized rent of 2 months, which is 1 lakh, and then I'll come to 4 lakh. Now इसमें से I will reduce municipal taxes, NAV, and so on. Okay, NAV आ जाएगा, उसमें से standard deduction. Now, next case is अगर if this would have been a case of partly let out and partly self-occupied with same figures. Expected rent would have been 56,000 you have told. Sorry, 48,000. If it's a case of partly let out and partly self-occupied. ठीक है? Expected rent आपने बोला 48,000 per month है. Actual rent for 10 months we can see 10 months tenancy is 50,000 per month, correct? अब इस केस में GAV would directly be equal to expected rent for 12 months period versus actual rent. अब यहाँ पे you don't have to see कि because of genuinity it is coming lower. No. यहाँ पे सीधा 48 into 12, 576 versus 5 lakh है. So 576 would be my GAV. सिंपल. यहाँ पे कुछ कंपेयर करने का जरूरत ही नहीं है. इफ सिनेरियो लेने का there is no need. If scenario, whether if the actual rent would have been for the entire year, what would have been the GAV, that scenario goes when we're talking about vacancy. Okay. But when we're talking about partly let out and partly self-occupancy, then you don't have to go into other pictures. You just have to compare it directly. A 576 will be my GAV. अब इस 576 GAV में से I will reduce my 1 lakh, which is unrealized rent, then 476. 476 में से I will reduce municipal taxes, then NAV, and then 30%, and then your interest deduction, and you come to your income from property. In all these scenarios, you will get interest without any ceiling limit. Ceiling limit applies only in case of self-occupied properties. Clear? Sure. Up with doubt. Vishali, is it clear now? अब मैंने क्वेश्चन कर लिया. I hope there would be no doubt. Okay. GAV expected rent, guys, in all situations you have to take for the entire year. वहाँ पे please expected rent को do not take it for the tenancy period to compare. Take it for the entire year compared with actual rent for the tenancy period. In case of self-occupied and partly let out में GAV would be the higher amount. But in case of a self let out property and vacant में GAV can be actual rent for the let out period, provided if the actual rent would have been the entire year, GAV would have been actual rent. Isliye, since it's a genuine case and actual rent is coming lower because of the vacancy, in that case GAV is equal to your actual rent. Okay, अब आगे चलते हैं. Next concept which is taken up in your module is about stock in trade. Now, what does this concept mean? Simple sa concept hai, guys. One second. This is from the perspective of your builders. Everyone, please focus here. Thank you. Property held as stock in trade. Matlab, here we are talking about builders who have built properties. उनके लिए properties are they stock in trade? क्योंकि वो उसको बेचेंगे, and on that they will get the income, right? So when properties are held in stock as stock in trade, I'm a builder. I have built 10 flats. Okay. Now these flats are my stock in trade. We agree on that? Because I'm into the business of building the buildings. Okay. Now the question comes. They say that in case where your property is held as stock in trade, the government says we will allow एक तरीके से these are all properties जिसका technically income from house property should have come. But since these are your stock in trade, fine. But if you're unable to sell them for a period of 2 years from the end of the financial year in which the completion certificate was received, यानी आपका property you are not able to sell them. Why? Because vacancy नहीं है. ये आपकी stock in trade है and ये sold out नहीं हुआ. These are my stock in trade and it did not get sell because of what? It can be any reason, but the time period to sell or it could not have been sold for a period of 2 years from the end of the financial year in which the certificate of completion was received. So suppose these flats were ready as on 5th May 2023. If these flats or any of this flat is not being able to be sold. By what time? 2 years from the end of the financial year. End of the financial year is 31st March 2024. So that means by 31st March 2026, if I am not able to sell these stock, as in these flats, then I have to start giving my income on notional basis, that is deeming provisions, that is notional basis pay. I have to offer the gross annual value of these flats. I have to offer the gross annual value of these flats as my notional income. किस साल से? From previous year 2026-27 से. 2026-27 से. मैम notional income आप GAV को expected rent मान के notional income you will offer. So, however, the annual value of property being held as stock in trade would be treated as nil for the period of 2 years from the end of the financial year in which the certificate of completion of property is obtained, if such property is not let out during the period. Once, if it is not let out if it is not sold or neither it is let out, it is just there as stock in trade. Once this 2 years period ends, once this 2 years period ends, you will show from the third year these properties ka GAV as your expected rent. Yeah, just 1 second, guys. So in case a property held as stock in trade by SESI, which is not let out, khali pada hua hai, income has to be computed on notional basis by taking expected rent as GAV after 2 years from the end of the financial year in which the certificate of completion of construction of the property was obtained. So in our case also, when the property was completed on 5th May 2023, so end कब हुआ? 31st March 2023. 2024, तो वो 2 years period कब end होगा? By 31st March 2026. So from previous year 26-27 onwards, all the flats which are unsold and are kept as stock in trade, उस पे अपना let out income दिखा रहे हो, or you are not showing any other income, उन flats का GAV हो जाएगा expected rent, and notional basis पे, that means you are not in real, you are earning income, but notional basis में you will offer it for tax. अब reason क्या है? Simple reason है. Government says, income tax authority says that you are a builder. You build flats, but now you are not able to sell it for a period of 2 or 2.5 years, which is not correct. That means either क्या हो रहा है? Either something is that you have let out those flats and you're not telling us, or they are actually being sold. Whatever can be the situation. So if you have let out those flats, no problem. You can let out your stock in trade, then up let out income दिखाओ. But if you are saying that these are unsold flats, and for the 2 years they're still unsold, then Baba start giving income on notional basis. Start giving income on notional basis once that 2 years period gets end. Once that 2-year period gets end. So can I say till the time of 31st March 2026, I am able to claim GAV as nil for these unsold flats. Once 31st March 2026 gets over, that is from 1st April 26 onwards, I have to show GAV at expected rent. Because ऐसा होता है, builders क्या करते हैं? They build flats and then they let it out for some period and they do not show that let out income. क्योंकि नेचुरली आप बिल्डर के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से सोचो एंड गवर्नमेंट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से सोचो, व्हाई आर यू नॉट सेलिंग द फ्लैट्स व्हिच आर बिल्ट एंड दैट टू फॉर अ 2 years पीरियड? ओके, या तो आपने उसे लेट आउट किया होगा, इधर यू हैव लेट आउट एंड यू आर नॉट टेलिंग अस, सो दैट्स व्हाई ओनली the 2 year period is allowed. If the 2 year period gets end, 2 year not from the date of completion of certificate, 2 years from the end of the financial year in which the completion certificate was issued. उसके बाद से from the end of that financial year, 2 years तक you claim GAV as nil, but after that you have to show your income on notional basis. Got it? Got it? The stock in trade wala point. I think someone asked me this in the starting of the class. समझ आया? सिंपल सा कॉन्सेप्ट है आपके केस में. दिस क्वेश्चन कैन कम as an MCQ, as a theory question also, so please focus on this. Can we claim loss, as in can you claim interest on loan in this case, Sudhanshu? Yes, you can claim interest on loan. If you have taken loan for constructing those flats, you can claim. Now we come towards the other concept, which is the concept of co-ownership. Now this is also a very interesting concept. Why? Let's understand. Co-ownership matlab a house property is held by two owners or two or more owners. Suppose there's one house property, okay, that is held by Mr. A and Mrs. A in equal share. Equally, Mr. A and Mrs. A hold this property. अब उस केस में क्या होगा? उस केस में the act says compute the net annual value of the property. Compute the net annual value of the property, assuming it is held by one owner. Then divide the share in the two co-owners basis on their share of ownership. So, अब suppose एक let out property है, which is co-owned by Mr. A and Mrs. A. So what will I do? Simple. उसका GAV निकालूंगी. Suppose उसका GAV is 5 lakhs. उसमें municipal taxes are paid are 40,000. So it comes to 4,60,000. Then इस पे standard deduction लूंगी 30%, which comes to 1,38,000. And then I will compute its interest. Now suppose interest is coming to, ये पूरा property का है, okay? Suppose interest is coming to your 1,20,000. So my proper value of the property comes to 2,02,000. Now this is of the property. So co-owner base पे क्या divide हो जाएगा? The property, the income which would be taxed would be 1,01,000 and 1,01,000. ठीक है, if they are equal co-owners. Had Mr. A been a co-owner for in the ratio of 3:2, or say he would have been a co-owner of 60 and 40% Mrs. A, so वो 2,02,000 का 60% would be an income of Mr. A. And remaining 40% would be the income of Mrs. A. Simple. Co-owner basis में, co-ownership के basis में you divide the income from house property. But my friends, there is one advantage when we get to know about co-ownership, and that advantage, my friend, here is of self-occupied property. One self-occupied property में कैसे? Let me tell you an example. Self-occupied property में each co-owner gets 2 lakh का interest का benefit. मतलब suppose a self-occupied property is there for which Mr. A and Mrs. A both are co-owners, and the interest on loan of this property is 4,50,000. Now, agar if this would have been by one co-owner, what you would have done? You would have given, if this is a construction loan, you would have said that, ma'am, 2 lakhs ka 2 lakhs का deduction हो जाएगा for interest on loan because maximum up to 2 lakhs है, so loss from house property would have been minus 2 lakhs, right? But here, if there is a co-ownership, suppose Mr. A is having 1/5 share and Miss 1/2 share, and Mrs. A also have half share. यहाँ पे each of them would be entitled to claim 2 lakhs separately. So 4,50,000 में A and Mrs. A का क्या share आया? 225 and 225 as interest deduction, restricted to maximum of 2 lakhs. So Mr. A के लिए भी the loss from house property would be 2 lakhs, and Mrs. A के लिए भी the loss from half of the property which she owns would be 2 lakhs. So ये दोनों को यहाँ पे 2 lakhs मिल गया, which in case if they would have been a single owner, only one person would have got, as in the owner would have got the maximum reduction of 2 lakhs. एक और example करते हैं. Suppose the property का interest is 4 lakhs, no, 3,70,000. अब क्या होगा? A and Mrs. A है, same thing would happen. 370 में से पहले दोनों का शेयर कितना हो गया? 185. So 185 would be allowed as deduction to Mr. A, and 185 would be allowed as deduction to Mrs. A as loss from self-occupied property, and 185 would be the income here, and 185 would be the income here. But friends, remember, suppose Mr. A has another house which he owns single-handedly, and उसपे interest on loan चल रहा है for repairs, and उसका interest is 30,000. So यहाँ पे 30 तो repair का interest हो गया, and 185 is the share of loss on house property self-occupied, right? Now 185 and 30 ये तो हो गया, but total maximum allowed as loss from self-occupied property is 2 lakhs. So that 2 lakh ka limit would apply individually, but each co-owner gets the limit of 2 lakhs or 30,000 as the case may be. Got it? Now let's pick up a question here. Aparna co-owns a residential house property in Calcutta along with her sister, Miss Dimple, where her sister's family resides. Both of them have equal share in the property, and the same is used for self-occupation. Okay. Equal share of 1/5, 1/5. Interest is payable in respect of loan of rupees 50 lakhs at 10% taken on 1st April 21 for acquisition of such property. In addition, Ms. Aparna owns a flat in Pune in which she and her parents reside. She has taken a loan of 3 lakh at 12% on 1st October 21 for repairs. Okay. Compute the deduction which would be allowed to Ms. Aparna and Ms. Dimple under section 24B for assessment year 23-24. सबसे पहले let's calculate for Ms. Aparna. So for Ms. Aparna, what is the interest on loan? Guys, what is the interest on loan? 50 lakh ka 10%, 5 lakh, and uska half share 2,50,000. Correct? So 2,50,000 which is allowed to Aparna, but इसमें यहाँ पे हम लिखेंगे 250 for property in Calcutta. Basis her share, and 3 lakh के 12% is also there for her Pune flats. तो वहां पे 36,000. Now this is restricted to 2 lakhs. Correct? This is restricted to maximum of 30,000. Correct? but in total they are restricted to maximum of 2 lakhs. So the reduction for Aparna comes to 2 lakhs. Now for Dimple also, she has only one property which is self-occupied, and uska half share comes to 2,50,000, correct? And but this is restricted to 2 lakhs. So for Dimple also the reduction is 2 lakh, and for Aparna also the reduction under 24B is 2 lakh. Got it? It is written in your screen, written on your screen also, and you can see it how the question has been solved. Co-ownership में कहीं doubt? Co-owners same area के होने चाहिए. अब जितेंद्र has asked, there are two brothers. One brother holds first floor, another brother holds second floor. तो वो ऐसा ले लो ना. First brother is a full independent. He has full independent unit. Second brother के लिए वो full independent unit ले लो. Municipal valuation को accordingly divide कर दो. Yes, co-ownership में common loan ही मिलता है. So if Aparna has let out, say, Pune property, she can claim interest in full for Pune property. Ceiling limit of interest is on what? Is on self-occupied property. So co-ownership में benefit क्या है? That 2 lakh or 30,000 limit as is applicable is available to each co-owner individually. Each co-owner का individual है, but that is restricted to their total 2 lakh per person if they have any other property. Simple. समझ आया? If ratio is 2:1, then 2/3 1/3 शेयरिंग हो जाएगा. फिर इंटरेस्ट 2/3 1/3 में कम डिवाइड होगा. फिर उसके बाद 2 lakhs and 30,000 का लिमिट वुड बी चेक. Yes, Rama, every two co-owner would get the 2 lakh or 30,000 as the case may be का reduction. आया समझ? चले आगे. Rama, is it clear? Kavita, is it clear? Okay. Sure. Now we come to the second last concept, which is A, unrealized rent if recovered subsequently. See, unrealized rent is a rent which cannot be realized with the due efforts at that particular time. आपको आपने रिटर्न फाइल करना था, आपने उससे पहले केस फाइल किया, यू फाइल फॉर द केस, यू फाइल फॉर द पुलिस कंप्लेंट, यू डिड योर बेस्ट to get the money off from the tenants, but you did not get it. Then you reduce those unrealized rent Either you can take an approach to reduce it from your gross annual value, or you can take an approach to reduce it from your actual rent and then come to your gross annual value. Okay. But if subsequently you are very lucky enough that you got the unrealized rent, as in the unrealized rent was recovered, police आपने case डाला था, those people were found out, they were asked to pay it, and say after 2 years you get that unrealized rent. This is recovery of unrealized rent, which we are talking about. Okay. Now, if that unrealized rent gets recovered, it would be my income from house property in the year when it is recovered. Now, suppose unrealized rent हुआ था in the previous year 2020, 2021. But somehow I received it in the previous year 23, 24. 1 लाख का unrealized rent था, 1 लाख मुझे अभी मिल गया. So this 1 lakh would become my income from house property in the year of 23, 24. I will not go to revise the return of previous year 2021. I will show it as my income in the previous year 23, 24. Simple. Now on this 1 lakh, there is 30% ka standard deduction which is allowed. 30% ka standard deduction is allowed, and 70,000 only would become taxable as unrealized rent recovered. It is immaterial whether in previous year 23, 24 I am the owner or not. Maybe मैंने 21, 22 में वो घर बेच दिया, maybe I've sold the house in 21, 22. But still, if an unrealized rent is recovered, it would become my income from house property, and there would be a deduction का 30% का benefit, and only 70,000 would be taxable, as we can see in this case. So to sum up, the concept of unrealized rent, taxable in the year of receipt, deduction at 30% is allowed, and taxable even if you're not the owner in the year of receipt. Sorted? Next and the last concept is the concept of deemed ownership. What is deemed ownership? See, deemed ownership, friends, is a concept where we talk about ownership नहीं है, legal ownership नहीं है, but as per deeming provisions, it appears that there is an ownership. Technically, ownership नहीं है, but because of the deeming provisions, the legal owner would not be considered as the owner. The other person would be considered as the owner. And जो owner सब कहेगा, that person would offer the income from house property. That person would be charged for GAV and other aspects. So, ma'am, what is this concept of deemed ownership? When does it apply? Why does it apply? Let's see. So deemed ownership, remember, ownership is the title to claim, ownership is the title for you to, ownership is the criteria, I should say, ownership is the criteria to charge income from house property, correct? But deemed ownership में क्या होगा? Legal title किसी और के पास होगा. The legal title is with someone else, but due to the provisions of section 27, which is deemed ownership, other person would be considered to have the ownership, and he would offer the income from house property under his return. लग रहा होगा कि property में नाम B का है, but because of the concepts of deemed ownership, A would be deemed to be the owner, and A would be the person who would offer income from house property under his return. Okay, clear? चलिए आगे. Now, what all are the conditions? So there are 6, 7 conditions whereby deemed ownership comes into picture, whereby the legal owner would, or the title owner would be someone else, but other person would be considered as the deemed owner, and he would offer the tax on income from house property. Okay. Now, suppose Mr. A has transferred the house to Mrs. A. People do it. वो कहते हैं कि ये हाउस आप ले लो ताकि इससे जो रेंटल इनकम आए आप अपना प्रॉपर्टी में दिखाना. Husband transfers house or wife transfer house to husband, whosoever has lower income, they transfer the house in their name, and they show so that they can divert the income, and they can show that this income is of the person who is the owner, which would be the person who has low income, right? So people generally do it. So they say that if a spouse transfers the house property to, if a person transfers the house property to his or her spouse without consideration or without advocate consideration, then in that case, the transferor is deemed to be the owner of the house property. Then in that case, the transferor is deemed to be the owner of that property. Mr. A ne what did he do? He transferred the property to Mrs. A. Registry किसके नाम पे है? Mrs. A के नाम पे. Legal title कौन है? Mrs. A. But since Mr. A transferred the property without any consideration, even if the legal title is in the name of Mrs. A, Mr. A would be considered as deemed owner and he would pay tax on income of house property which is transferred. Why? Because लोग क्या करते हैं? They do it to divert the income, but they forget that there is a provision to cover this loophole that legal owner would not be considered as a final owner. Deemed owner would be considered as a final owner and he will show income from house property, and people do it just to divert fund, but now it is not successful. Mr. A would be the deemed owner and he would show income from house property. Now, whether that house property is self-occupied, whether that house property is let out, or Mr. A has more property, जो भी situation है, whatever provisions would be applicable, which we saw, whatever combinations which we saw in the past two classes, all those combinations will apply because now Mr. A is deemed owner. Now suppose Mr. A has already two self-occupied property and now of this he is a deemed owner, so he has to take one as deemed letter property. So the provisions is first to check the ownership. Ownership किसकी होगी? Generally person who has legal title. But in certain scenarios, the ownership would be to some other person, would be deemed to be the some other person other than the person who has the legal title. How would that be decided? By reading the provisions of Section 27. Section 27 first provision is if you transfer the property to the spouse without advocate consideration, say out of love and affection, then even if the legal title is in the name of spouse, you would be considered as the deemed owner and you will show it as the income from house property. But exception bhi hai. If you are transferring that property because of alimony मिलता है. Alimony क्या होता है, sir? When divorce happens and you have to pay some amount as what on the basis of court or out of your own will for an agreement to live apart on separation, that is called alimony. So if the spouse is getting that property because of alimony, then deemed ownership would not happen. Deemed owner का concept क्यों लाया? Because people used to divert their properties into some other's name to divert the income so that they do not have to pay the taxes. But alimony, as in the where the person is transferring the property because of an agreement to live apart, Mr. A in that case will not be deemed to be the owner, just not by saying कि advocate consideration नहीं हुआ. Second case can be Mrs. A paid full consideration for that property. Mrs. A paid from her own sources the full consideration for the property. Then Mrs. A would be the legal owner, and then Mrs. A would be the legal owner, and deemed ownership would not come. Deemed ownership would come when it is not without any consideration or without any advocate consideration. 15 lakhs का property में 1 lakh में दिखा रही कि आप taken है, उस केस में transferor would be the deemed owner. Got it? किसी को कोई doubt? This is not co-ownership, friends. This is deemed ownership. So section 27 में first aspect is deemed ownership, and deemed ownership, where first aspect is transferring the property to spouse without advocate consideration. In that case, the transferor would be considered to be the deemed owner, even if the legal title is in the hands of transferee. But exception is when a property is transferred as agreement to live apart, or where the spouse gives the full consideration from her own source funds to the transferor, then in those cases it would not be considered as deemed ownership का सही. चले next concept which is covered under deemed ownership is, again, just like to divert the income in the name of spouse, person क्या करते हैं, they used to take property in the name of minor child. So in case, or they transfer the property in the name of minor child. In case of transfer of house property by individual to his or her minor child, otherwise than for an advocate consideration, the transferor would deemed to be the owner of the property. Mr. A ने अपनी property shift कर दी junior A के नाम पे. Mr. A transferred the property to junior A, and junior A, as in his son, did not give any advocate consideration. Then in this case, Mr. A would be considered to be the deemed owner, even if the legal title now is in the hands of junior A. Mr. A still would be considered as deemed owner, and he would offer income from house property for that particular property. But suppose junior A is a child artist, he is earning well, उसमें से उन्होंने मिस्टर ए को पैसे दे दिए. अगर एडवोकेट कंसिडरेशन हो गया guys, advocate consideration happens, then it's not a concept of deemed ownership. Concept is of deemed ownership when the transfer is happening without advocate consideration to spouse or to minor child Mr. A transferring the property to his son, Mr. B, but son is major. He is more than the age of 18 years. Deemed ownership would apply? No, deemed ownership would not apply. Why? Because the concept of deemed ownership is for transfer to minor child, not to major child. Okay. Another exception here is that in case the transfer has happened in the name of minor married daughter, though it is illegal for minors to get married, but if the transfer has happened in the name of minor married daughter, then it would not be considered as deemed ownership. Example, Mr. A transferred the property to her girl child, Mrs. A, who is minor and married. Now, आपने बोला था कि मैम minor है तो deemed ownership आएगा, but since she is a minor married daughter, deemed ownership would not be considered. But had this girl, Mrs. C, would have been not married, and the property would have been transferred by Mr. A to his daughter, Miss C, then it would have been a concept of deemed ownership. Got it? Next concept of deemed ownership is holder of impartible estate. अब कुछ लोग इसे impartible estate बोलते हैं, कुछ लोग इसे impartible estate बोलते हैं. Now, what is impartible estate? Impartible estate is a property which cannot be divided because of law. Some legal provisions are there because of which it is not divisible. But उसमें सबका share है. Every person involved has its shares, but legally it is not divisible. Legally it cannot be partitioned. Legally it cannot be divided. Some law is governing, because of that you cannot divide it. In that case, my friends, the owner of the impartible estate would be considered to be the owner of the entire property, would be considered to be the deemed owner of the entire property. Even if other people have shared in that property, still that individual holder would be considered to be the deemed owner. Next, member of a cooperative society. अब cooperative societies में क्या होते हैं? Once you become a member, generally in cooperative housing schemes क्या होते हैं? Where they have societies. Okay. Now each society में a member gets a flat for their membership. Flat किसको मिल रहा है? Members को. रह कौन रहा है? Members. Who is getting the flats? Member. Who is staying in that property? Members. But the property legally is in the name of the cooperative society. Members are enjoying the benefit of the property because of them being the member. So they are allotted or they are given it on lease. Who are given it on the lease? Members are given it on the lease. Legal owner is who? Legal owner is cooperative society. But in this case of deemed ownership, the members would be considered to be the deemed owner. The members would be considered to be the deemed owner, even if the property is in the name of cooperative society, but since it is being allotted to them, they are enjoying the benefit of those property, they would be considered to be as deemed owner, and they would show as income from house property for that allotted share. It is very common in case of cooperative housing societies. Next is person in possession of property. A person in possession of the property मतलब अब मैंने Mr. A है who sold the property to Mr. B. दोनों unrelated person है. But अभी registry नहीं हुआ. Registry means legal title has not been transferred. Legal title is yet to be transferred. Yet to be transferred मतलब since the legal title has not been transferred, registrar के पास जाके you did not sign that the sale has happened. But among Mr. A and Mr. B, they have done all the formalities which prima facie shows that the property has been transferred. Mr. A ने क्या किया? Mr. A has given the possession to Mr. B. Mr. B is enjoying the property. Mr. B has paid the consideration for the property. एक basic agreement to sell या power of attorney या कुछ भी agreement हो चुका है. बस legal title still is in the name of Mr. A. Legal title is still in the name of Mr. A because the formality for that legal title to be transferred, that is registry, is still pending. But otherwise, possession has been given, consideration has been given, essential performance of the contract has been done. Now, you cannot say that since the legal title is Mr. A, he would be the owner. No, if all those necessary things which are required for the performance of the contract is done, consideration is paid, possession is done, एक agreement to sell हो चुका है, and Mr. B is now enjoying the property, then Mr. B would be deemed owner, even if on papers Mr. A is the owner. But since Mr. B got the possession, he paid the consideration, there is an agreement between them. Just a legal formality to reh ke, not because of that legal formality pending, we cannot say Mr. A is the owner. No, Mr. B would be considered to be the deemed owner. And from that date, when he is considered to be the deemed owner, he would show it as income from house property. Last thing is person having right in the property for a period of not less than 12 years. So if a person is living in a property with one agreement continuing for more than 12 years or for 12 years or more, that person automatically becomes the owner of that property. Agar he is living in the same property by renewing, by entering into 11 months ke contract, by entering into 11 months ke contract or 1 year ke contract, that is not considered to be living in the property for 12 years. But as on lease, suppose I'm living in that property for 12 years or more, single contract ke basis pe, or without any dispute, I'm living there, I would be considered to be the deemed owner of the property and I have to give rent on it, or I have to give income on it. Now, the final concept of deemed ownership is that when the legal title is someone else, but other person would be considered to be deemed owner. Legal title transfer to spouse में spouse के पास होगा, but the transferor, Mr. A here, would be considered to be the deemed owner. He would pay income on tax on income of house property. Another case may, when the minor child को property is transferred, minor child would be considered to be the deemed owner, but the person, the parent who is transferred would be minor child is the legal owner, but the parent would be considered to be the deemed owner. Exceptions are transfer to major child, transfer to minor married daughter, or transfer for advocate consideration. Holder of impartible estate may, though every person has their own estate, though every person has their own share, but the holder, the owner of the impartible estate, would be considered to be the deemed owner. Member of cooperative society may, cooperative society is the legal owner, But the members who are enjoying the flats which are being allotted to them or leased to them, those members would be considered to be the deemed owner. Person in possession of property, the person, other person is still the legal owner because the formality of transferring through registry is pending. But since the other person who has the possession has given the consideration as having an agreement, that person would be considered to be the deemed owner. Person having a right in a property for a period of not less than 12 years or for a period of 12 years or more, a person legal owner, but who is enjoying that property for 12 years on a single agreement through way of lease or rent, that person would be considered the deemed owner and he would pay tax on it. Got it? Deemed ownership पे theory question आ सकता है. Deemed ownership पे question आ सकता है, especially from first, second perspective and especially from fifth point. So these 3 points are extremely important at your level. So that's it from my side for your income from house property. Does anyone have any doubt in relation to income from house property? I'll be very happy to answer. And I hope you enjoyed the understanding of income from house property. Just remember, building, there should be a building, there should be an ownership for section 2022. So for section 2020, so 2022, for section 22, there should be owner and building. The person would show it as income from house property. Then you have to compute the gross annual value basis the scenario. Scenario could be the property could be let out for the entire year. The property could be self-occupied. There could be more than 2 self-occupied property. There could be co-owners. There could be a property which is let out for part of the year and self-occupied for the part of the year. There could be property which is let out for the part of the year and vacant for part of the year. There could be property which is held as stock in trade by the builder. Us case mein gross annual value would be considered as nil for the 2 years from the year till the from the year when the completion certificate is given. Uske baad gross annual value would be notional basis pe expected rent. Then there could be a property, a portion of which is self-occupied, a portion of it which is let out. Sif, remember, a purely self-occupied property may there would be ceiling limit of 2,30,000. Otherwise, in all other types of scenario, you will get the deduction of entire interest, municipal taxes, and then whatever the result is coming to be loss or profit, that would be considered. Loss or income, that would be considered. Composite rent, we completed income from land outside India, or the property outside India was done. Then we did the concept of deemed ownership. We did the concept of recovery of unrealized rent. So kahin pe bhi kisi ko doubt hai, please feel free to ask. When consideration is inadequate, Sudhanshu, then also it would be a deemed ownership in the hands of transferor. Very good question. Sudhanshu asked that suppose मैंने property दे दिया to one of my friend for free. Will it be a concept of deemed ownership? No, friend. It would not be a concept of deemed ownership. It would be a concept of gift, which would be taxable in the hands of recipient. That you will learn in other sources. Okay. Kavita, we will be meeting, I think, next month, same time as in around 27, 28 for set off and carry forward. Meanwhile, you have very, very important heads of income coming up. Income from other sources is easy peasy, but income from capital gains and your profit and gains of business and profession is extremely important topic. So please do not lose on them. Please stay connected on all the lectures, okay? I will join you for clubbing and set off again. So ship visits Indian port tax. So Mohammed Nasri has a question that ships who visits on Indian port tax is being paid before sailing out. in this case, say some 5% of the freight is paid to the charters. Can you please advise what does it mean and how they calculate tax? So, Mohammed Nasri, this question actually belongs to a final level because this is as per section 172. 172 में the provision is for calculating a foreign ship coming to India by carrying on passengers or goods or leaving India by carrying passengers or goods. They have to pay tax before they leave. They are not allowed to leave before they pay tax. That tax is calculated as a certain percentage as per section 172. वहां पे वो freight charters nothing is there accordingly. तो tax जितना भी income होता है, that is whatever is the freight they are collecting from passengers or for the goods, उसका एक certain percentage is offered as income, and at the same time the return is filed by paying the challan itself. So that is as per section 172. This 5% freight वगैरह etc. does not come into picture for calculating your tax. वहाँ पे section 172 को एक बारी पढ़ोगे, you will get the clarity. But again, that is not there for your level. Thank you so much, Kavita. Next thing is, I think Vishali has a point, deemed owner, 6th part. So person having a right in a property for a period not less than 12 years. अब क्या होता है? This एक situation है, a person is living in a property, ठीक है? He is living there through a lease agreement. He has been living there through a lease agreement. कोई आया नहीं property को वापस claim करने के लिए. No one came. He is living there. वो रह रहा है तब से वहाँ पे. And that period is 12 years or more. Then automatically from the 12th year, he would become the deemed owner, even if the legal title is in someone else's hand. But since he has been there, he was living on lease. Now, since he has been there for such a substantial period, which is 12 years or more, from that year itself, he would be considered as deemed owner. Okay, but suppose a person is living in a house for both होता है tenant 10-15 साल रहते हैं, they stay in a house 10 years, 15 years, but they are staying it by virtually renewing the agreement again and again. This is the reason, that's why agreements are for 11 months, or that's why they are for 2 years. Then you go to court, re-register the agreement. That does not come under this provision. A provision here is if on single agreement basis you are staying for 12 years or more and no one said and claimed to vacate the property, you are living there, so automatically from 12th year onwards, you would be considered as the deemed owner. Got it? Muhammad Nasri, this is again the taxation at this level is just not right to be commented on, because that is an entire provision which you have to understand, which is section 172. Yes, you can send all your doubts. Vishali, is it clear? So my best wishes to all of you. Jitendra Singh, what is the sequence of studying taxation? The best way to study taxation is first to adapt it in your real life. Try to make it as much relatable as you can. Start studying basic concepts. Start studying from residential status. Pick headwise. Pick the charging section. What does the charging section says about that particular head? And assume yourself to be that person. Suppose salary के case में assume yourself to be the employee and pick element by element and see what amount is getting taxable for allowances, what amount is getting taxable for perquisites for the value. Pick element by element, total करके standard deduction दो to come to salary. Similarly for house property, start by picking from element by element. take yourself as owner, compute gross annual value. Gross annual value would depend upon the scenario. Get to the municipal taxes, get to your standard deduction and interest. Just remember the ceiling limit. Bas. This is how you study taxation. Pick headwise. Start making your self notes, which would help you in a long way. Start practicing all the questions which are given in your modules. Diksha, if the property is transferred to major child, as we discussed in example, major son को transfer कर दिया या major daughter को, it is not the concept of deemed ownership. Deemed ownership will only trigger when it is transferred to minor child, and that too other than minor married daughter. Okay, so thank you so much. Wish you all the best. Please stay focused and don't let the syllabus overwhelm you. Take it step by step. Thank you so much. See you very soon.